Hello again, buddies. Hey, it's Concert Buddy. Firing off a quick video, and I'm going to try to make it quick, to do a contest entry in support of the one, the only, Mr. David Bianco. His channel, The Sound of Safe and Sound Texas, is going through a metamorphosis. It's looking to rebrand, tweak his name just a little bit, and continue his ascent up the YouTube vinyl community ladder. All that said, David's a really cool guy. I've talked to him a couple times, very casually. I really like the stuff he does on his channel. I'll put a link below so you can check it out yourself. I made some highlights. He went to Salina, Kansas, and talked to the one and only Chad Castle, and had some really great conversations and information, fact-finding coming out of that. But then David's actually very interesting in that he's worked in radio, has a great radio voice. If you watch his channel, you'll pick up on that real quick. And, especially with the MoFi stuff that came out, he had a lot of really great videos about that. So, all that said, the contest was pretty straight and narrow. He's changing the name of his channel. He kind of threw the gamut out there of what are some bands that recorded as X and changed their name to Y, which kind of was a very fascinating thing that I hadn't really considered outside of a couple little nugs. And then also some recommendations for new names for the channel. So I've already sent those over to David via email.
Yeah, but they were all bad.
So I'm just going to focus for this video about the actual band X, band Y kind of thing. So let's get into it. So the first band that kind of came to mind when I saw David's video and was kind of putting together my thoughts on this contest entry, it's one of my favorite bands. Out of Pennsylvania, the band's called Live. If you're not a big fan like I am, you probably heard some of their work in the mid-90s, 1994, 95. They had their probably signature, their most noteworthy album, Throwing Copper, with Lightning Crashes, I Alone, so many great songs out of that. But like any great band, they had to start somewhere. So we rewind the tape a little bit. Whoops, I almost dropped the records.
Really, dude? Really?
Rewind the tape a little bit to 1989. So if you're alive in 1989, you'll remember things like the Exxon Valdez oil spill, or the 49ers beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, stuff like that. But one thing you may not know is that 1989 is where Live first started as a band called Public Affection. And their first record, not even a record, their first EP that they released was on cassette tape. It's extremely hard to find. This is a bootleg CD of that cassette tape. This is The Death of the Dictionary. This is their first release as the band that would later become Live. So I found this on eBay like 15 years ago. I didn't know it was a bootleg. Very naive at how these things worked back then.
I'm not a tech guy.
Public Affection are some dudes who met in high school in Pennsylvania who were lifelong friends that eventually formed the band Live. So some of the songs on this EP then made their way to Live's first album, I named first album, but first vinyl recording that I have, which is the 4 songs EP, which then one of, I think a couple of these songs, maybe just one, then become the basis for Live's first full-length album as Live, and this is Mental Jewelry, a tremendous album. This did not come out on vinyl originally. I think I have a German press somewhere, but fortunately they reissued this a couple years ago when the band got back together. It's a whole side story, and they came out on this beautiful, luscious purple wax, which matches the album. So Public Affection became Live, number 1. So the second band that I thought of, maybe the first band, I don't know. Again, a lot of different thoughts go in this skull of mine. But an obvious one for this contest to talk about, and then I had some records, is one of my favorite bands, Pearl Jam. So Pearl Jam released 10 in 1991. It actually didn't come out on vinyl for some reason until 94, this copy. I've talked about it in other videos before. But before they were Pearl Jam, and before Eddie Vedder was in the band, they were a band called Mother Love Bone. So this album on Polydor was released with their previous singer, Andrew Wood, who unfortunately passed away to a drug overdose. But the core guys left in that band persevered and wanted to continue. And they got hooked up with Eddie Vedder, who then, was, I think, living in San Diego at the time, and, knew some guys who knew some guys, and then they got together and then put their heads together and they released this monumental debut album, 10. So both of these are really fantastic records, to be honest with you. But obviously, Pearl Jam is, if not they're one of the top 3 biggest bands of my come up in the late 80s, early 90s, etc. So that's the second band I could think of for this contest. All right, so the last band I'm going to talk about for this video in this contest is one of my favorite bands. Again, I think I've said this for every band. I like these bands. How about that? Talking about Stone Temple Pilots, this is not their original release. This is the self-titled second album. But before we get into that, let's rewind the tape a little bit. So talking about Live, Public Affection, 1989. Also in 1989, the band Stone Temple Pilots forms, officially begins recording. I think they got signed to Atlantic, but they were called Mighty Joe Young. Unfortunately, they found out that Mighty Joe Young was also the name of a blues singer, so it didn't really make a lot of sense to try to record and come out as a band as Mighty Joe Young. So all that said, they rebranded and became Stone Temple Pilots. We're talking about the DeLeo brothers, Robert and Dean, some great songwriters, Eric Kretz, I think was his name, on drums, and then, of course, one of my favorite frontmen of the 90s, Scott Weiland. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But I don't think, and again, don't quote me, in the comments below, tell me if I'm off base on this one. Mighty Joe Young did not have any kind of formal releases that came out. It's more of, that was the band, they signed to Atlantic, and then they collectively decided to rebrand as Stone Temple Pilots, STP, and then the rest is alternative music history. So this is an original pressing of this album, which, to be honest with you, is not the best sounding version of this. It's been reissued a couple different times. I think it even came out on Purple. This album's called Purple, by the way, and I think I called it self-titled before, but this album's called Purple. But tremendous album. This was the follow-up to their giant monster debut Core that had Sex Type Thing and Cracker Man and Big Empty. Just, golly, I know I did a video, I'll put the link somewhere around here, of my Mount Rushmore of 90s bands, but STP personally was on my personal Mount Rushmore, just like Live, just like Pearl Jam. So anyway, I'm doing like an indirect Mount Rushmore through this video. So anyway, that is my entry for this video. Fully recommend checking out David's channel. Give it a test drive. I'll be very curious to see where he lands on a name, because I think several people have thrown in entries into the arena. So I'll be very interested to see where this lands out. But that's all we got for this video. Buddies, tell me what you think below. Give David's channel a follow, a sub, a look-see, whatever you want to call it. And until next time, my friends, my buddies, my pals, when you get the chance, just spin it. See you next time.
Well, well, well. How the turntables...
Well, we out of time.